Hello, I hope you are enjoying yourself. It's not too hot. If it is, please tweet for beer. We are then delivering you some fresh Bavarian beer if you want to. I'm super proud to be announcing our last speaker for the track, Laura from Ghost. And we were talking today a lot about core technologies, products, environment, smart cities, smart homes, everything around us, but we haven't spoken about ourselves. And this is exactly what Laura is going to do. Please give her a warm applause.
Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for joining me for this session today. Laura, you're here because I want to talk about broadening the human perception. And thank you. Sorry. Broadening the human perception. So my name is Laura. I'm a biomedical engineer, partially also started here in Munich. Now CEO and co-founder of a Berlin-based startup with a mission to broaden the human perception. So I know what a few of you are thinking. So she's from Berlin, and she want to talk about how to experience the world in a different way. This talk is probably going to be about drugs, but it's not. I have to disappoint you. It's completely drug-free. It's only about technology and the capabilities of the human mind. So what are things that we can perceive? We can see things, we can smell them, we can taste them, we can touch them. So these are all different ways on how we perceive the world. And why would we want to broaden the perception that we already have? So basically, there are two main reasons for that. The one is we want to broaden the human or enhance the human in a way that he can do things that he could never do before. And the other way, that is what I will mostly be focusing on today, is we want to restore a function of the human body that was lost to it before. Specifically, I want to talk about the loss of touch and the loss of sensation. So let's, Wie macht man denn hier weiter? So let's imagine somebody with severe nerve damage. So if you have damage in, for example, your wrist area, you will not be able to transmit signals via your nerves from the hand to the brain. That will be an open loop system. You will not have any feedback directly from your hand. So what will be lost is, for example, pressure. So you won't feel when you touch something. You don't know if you, for example, crush an egg that you want to put up, or if the glass that you just wanted to pick up will fall out of your hands. But at the same time, you will also lose the feeling of temperature. And we talked to a lot of patients, and they all, or most of them, already experienced very similar things. They are working in an environment, for example, in the kitchen, and they smell something burning. And only after a while, they actually realize that it's their own hand that they have left on the stove, which is quite absurd if you think about it, but if you don't get any feedback from your hand, obviously this is what's going to happen. Another thing that will be lost, other than the sensation itself, is the self-attribution. Patients often refer to their hand in the third person, or their arm, because they are not thinking of it as their own anymore. They say, oh, it got stuck in the door again, or it, whatever. So they're referring to it in the third person. And the third thing that will be lost is called the proprioception. And because it's a very complicated word, and I want to show you and visualize what it actually means, I want to all hope that you will engage in a very short experiment, and I promise it won't be embarrassing. So everyone, please put up your hands in front of your body. Yeah, and now close your eyes. Okay, so make a fist, open your hands again, now turn them, so palms facing each other, and now clap. Thank you, you can open your eyes again. So that was simple, right? But if you think about it, it's actually not that simple. you had no idea where your hands were, or you had an idea where your hands were. You knew that you could close your hands. You know which muscles to contract to make a fist. You know which ones to open. You know which ones to turn. And you even perceived where in space your hands were in order to meet each other in space without looking at them. And I hope nobody punched their neighbor. So this is what proprioception means. It's basically the internal navigation system of your body. It will tell you where your hands are, where your joints are, where your muscles are, which muscles to contract, and which ones, how to control them directly. And this is what will be lost if you have, for example, severe nerve damage. And so what happens if you don't have that anymore is you can only control your hands when you're actually looking at them. And it requires a lot of concentration. Because, for example, if you have nerve damage in your wrist area, the muscles to move your fingers are in your forearm. So you would theoretically still be able to move them. But it will be very difficult to think, pinky, move, if you don't look at it, because you don't know how to direct it. So this is what happens. You can only, with the loss of proprioception and with the loss of sensation, you will only be able to move your fingers, if at all, with very high level of concentration. So the three things that I talked about today, the loss of sensation, loss of self-attribution, and loss of proprioception is also true not only for nerve damage, but also for people who lost their entire hand. So for example, for prostheses. So let's look at some numbers. Only 50% of all prostheses, of all people fitted with a prosthesis actually only rarely ever use them. And 76% of those basically primarily only use them for cosmetic purposes, not because of their functionality. And that's quite shocking in my eyes, because the main focus of development today is on improving the functionality of prosthesis, not about integrating your imagination or making it more intuitive to use the prosthesis, or making it more a part of your body and an extension of your body rather than increasing the functionality. And this limits people and patients basically in all aspects of their life, in work life, like personal lives, and in their daily lives. So for example, like I said, you can only move your fingers when you look at them, so say goodbye to looking for your keys in your pocket, or playing an instrument, or even typing on a keyboard without looking at the keyboard itself. And only 66% of all amputees after surgery go back into their work. And I want to share with you a quote from Dr. Michael Kremer. It's, "I'm quite certain that no amputee with an artificial lower limb can walk on it satisfactorily until the body image, in other words, the phantom, is incorporated into it." So what he's referring to is, once you have lost a limb, you still have a phantom, or can have a phantom impression of your limb that you've lost. We all heard of phantom pain, when that limb hurts the patient even though it's not there. But they also have, you can still have the sensation, not only in a bad way. You can also just have it and just imagine that your hand is here. And that's what he's referring to. He says that you have to mix and integrate that phantom impression of your hand, or your foot in that case, into the prosthesis in order to use it properly. Because you will not trust a stick bound to your leg if you don't imagine it as your own leg. That's the self-attribution that I was talking about earlier. So the company that I work for, we're designing a smart glove that will basically rewire a piece of your brain to make you feel the hand on a different part of your body again. And we will all do that non-invasively. So when I tell people, or when we tell people, we usually get the same responses. The technical challenges, they all kind of believe, that we can have some sensors, have some output devices, and have some kind of machine learning in the middle to make sense of all of it. And they kind of believe us because it's something you can grasp. It's something we all heard of today. It's something we know. But if you look at all the other disciplines that are also involved, which are mainly the neuroscience and the medicine part of it, that's where it's a little bit more complex. And we usually get a lot of skepticism, especially when we talk about with techies and with physicians about it. So how do we do it? It's something called neuroengineering or neurohacking that we're doing. I told you before, we want to rewire a part of your brain. And how we do that is we take up signals, we process them, and then we give them to a part of your body, and then basically train this part of your brain to direct to another part of your brain, to feel your hand on another body part. Sounds very complex, and I know it's a lot of people are still skeptical after we say that. So let's jump into a little bit of what the brain can do, because the two main things why we get the skepticism is firstly because it's non-invasive, so we don't connect directly to the nerves, but we connect to the skin. So it's kind of hard to get the idea, if you think about it, if I have a wire and it connects to the nerve and then you give it a signal, then obviously this is going to work. But if you connect it through the skin, this is something that is not so intuitive. And the other thing is that we generally underestimate the capabilities of our brains. And if you have a look at the research has already been done, there's quite a lot out there. For once, there is some research looking at long-term amputees to investigate their phantom sensations that we had, the lost hand. And they found that in a few cases, the patients were able to feel their hands when stroked on their cheek. And that kind of sounds a bit weird because the cheek is not close to your hand at all. Why would you feel your hand on your cheek and not, at the stump of your hand? And that's because the part of your brain that is responsible for your hand is now unemployed. And the brain doesn't like that at all because it wants to have something to do, So it kind of finds its way through the brain, something that is kind of close on the map, on the organizational map of sensing your body, close to the part that was lost. And if you remember the homunculus, which is the organizational structure of your body on the brain, then you know that the hand is very close to the face. So that's where it kind of grew and made new connections towards the face. And that's what's called the neuroplasticity. So that itself doesn't help us much because it kind of happens randomly and also takes quite a while. So let's have a look at another experiment that actually personally fascinated me quite a lot when I was first looking into the whole discipline. And that's something called the rubber hand illusion experiment. I don't know if a few of you have heard of it. There are tons of YouTube videos, and I strongly recommend you watching one of those. They're really quite funny to watch. But the setup is always the same. So a patient places his two working hands on a table, and you have a rubber hand placed right next to one of those hands. In the second step, you put a wall between the participant and his hand, his functioning hand, to hide it. So the participant will only see his real hand and the rubber hand in front of him. And now, for example, using a paintbrush, the real hand, the hidden hand, and the rubber hand will be stimulated at the same time, on the same finger, for example. And after only a few minutes, it's enough to only use the paintbrush on top of the rubber hand for the patient to feel his hand being touched at that exact position. Which is crazy because the rubber hand is just lying there. It's not connected to your body at all. You just watched it being stimulated a bunch, and now you feel like it is your own. So but out of from the many studies that have been done, basically all participants agreed or strongly agreed that they felt like the rubber hand was their own, and that they felt the paintbrush being basically as their own touch. And they also adapted the ownership of the hand, saying something like, I found myself looking at the dummy hand, thinking it was actually my own. So that's quite fascinating, and what we were able, or what everyone doing these experiments was able to do, is to show that you could restore, at least for this time frame, the sensation and the self-attribution with the rubber hand itself. And it even goes so far that you think the hand is yours, that the hidden hand is kind of a little bit detached from your body in a way that the temperature within the hand very locally decreases with the vividness of the rubber hand illusion rising. So the more you think the rubber hand is your hand, the colder your actual hand gets, because you're distancing yourself from the hidden hand and being more one with the rubber hand. So I took you on a very brief journey within the neuroscience and what the rubber hand and everything kind of means for the brain, and how small experiments like that can non-invasively act on the brain and change the brain in a way that would be possible to restore proprioception, sensation, and self-attribution. So for the future, what we say is, if we can restore the functionality of a body part or of the sensation by restoring these three things, we'll be able to empower the patients to improve their quality of life drastically and to reintegrate them into their daily lives, their work lives, and their social lives again. And so what I did not talk about particularly much was enhancing the human. How would what is the possibility of enhancing the human as itself? But the technology that we are developing can, in theory, also be used for a lot of other things. Because once you can help, what you proved, that it is possible to train somebody to feel their lost hand again, it is only a very small step to say, okay, but if you can train yourself to feel this lost hand or this rubber hand, wouldn't it be possible to feel a third hand? And obviously, it would be quite useless to have a third arm sticking out of your shoulder blade, but if you think about it in the ways of robotics or assistive devices, it would be quite useful to have this, to get the feedback. And I'm more than welcome to talk about all of this and hear your creative ideas on how to enhance the human even further. And please feel free to approach me after the show. Thanks. Okay. Are there any questions?
Thank you for a great keynote.
Thanks.
How applicable are those technologies in the area of virtual reality and creating haptic sensation in those fields, games, etc.?
We actually get that a lot, and I think haptic feedback in something like virtual reality is a really big market. There are a few companies currently looking into this, and we're actually not going to plan on tackling that, because it is a difference, because, yeah, the difference is, when you're in virtual reality, you usually play yourself. So it would be very useless for you to get stimulation on a different part of your body that you first have to learn how to interpret in order to play this game. So ideally, in virtual reality, you just pick up a glove and it stimulates the body actually where it's supposed to be stimulated, because then you can skip the whole training process. So we're mainly focusing on situations where it would be beneficial to enhancing the situation rather than just simulating the real world. So for example, if a person in virtual reality had 3 hands or 4 hands, then that would be a topic where we could be in the picture again.
Also, thank you for the talk. I was interested in the non-invasive glove. Are there actually already some test subjects that trained with it and were able to use their prosthetics better and actually regain those 3 things?
There's a lot of research going on different output stimuli and how you would be able to interpret that better. And there is proof in different papers that shows that with the feedback loop closed, you will be able to use your prosthesis better. With orthotics, so when you still have your hand, there's not been so much research around.
So thank you very much. I was wondering, how far is your progress? Do you have a working prototype, and what are you using for your brain-computer interface? So you have to get the signals from the brain.
So what we do is we basically only close the feedback loop. So we are not, what we won't do is help people close their hand or move their hand, because we want to basically cooperate with other companies out there that already have developed technology to move their hand and to develop the prosthesis properly. So what we want to do is basically only get the feedback, and so we don't necessarily need the brain-computer interface in terms of going directly to the brain, but being non-invasive and stimulating the skin instead. And we do have a functioning prototype, and obviously, it's a medical product, so it has to go a very far away until we can actually get it to the market itself. But yeah, we're working on it.
I didn't understand in detail how that, like where you get touched. If I imagine I lost my left arm, or parts of it, until the elbow, and then if something touches the prosthesis at my fingers, where will the device touch my skin? Like, is it on the upper arm, or which parts, and where's the limit? Like, if I lost the whole arm, where would the prosthesis attach to? Right.
So in theory, it's possible to even get the output on your leg, but that is very situation dependent. So depending on where you lost your hand or where you lost your limb, and also we are currently looking into the best spots that would work, ideally, because. Yeah, there's a lot of research, on arms or on backs or on the different side arm, and we just have to figure out which one works best, and that's the main research that we're putting into right now.
Last question.
We have one more here.
You said that you have to learn and train. So how long does that take? Is it a matter of months or years?
It's definitely not a matter of years. So there are 2 different ways on how you incorporate it. So the first one being represented by the rubber hand. So you kind of learn pretty quickly the beginning on how to use it, but it won't feel natural or very intuitively without thinking about it until the brain actually adapted. But it will still work before that happened.
Okay, last 2 questions.
My question is, would this also work on somebody who was born without arms, so who never actually learned on how a real physical hand works and might not have the connections in the brain? Might he also develop something like this, or is that not possible?
I mean, we still have to do clinical trials to prove that it works, but we're pretty confident that it will work. The thing with people who were born without arms is that you know, they lived their entire lives without a prosthesis, so why would they start using one now? So these are definitely in the 50% that rarely ever use it if they do, you know? So for once, the prostheses have to be a lot better and a lot more easily controllable, also for people who don't have, for example, the muscles in that area to control them, to still control their prostheses. And I think before we can really tackle the people who were born without arms, the prostheses first have to be better.
Okay, very last question.
Thanks for the talk, very interesting and very clear. What do you think about cyborgs and the cyborg community as like last topic on the future or past? No, what do you think?
Cyborgs are cool, I don't know. No, I think it's very fascinating what they can do with their brains, and I think it's, they're very brave for them to actually go the step and for us to learn from their experiences as a single case study. I also think that once it gets to the stage of where it's called a cyborg, the ethics problem or ethics plays a lot bigger role. On, you know, are we all supposed to be? Do we at one point all have to be cyborgs in order to be able to compete on the market and so on? But at the stage that we are at right now, I really admire them for what they do.
Super.
Thank you.
Big applause for Laura. I told everyone it's going to be the best closing note on this track. So we are done here. I have 3 information points for you guys. First, the closing note is going to take place right now in the disruption track in the big area. Second, we are going to close it right now. So please take all your belongings, check it out if you haven't left here anything, because it's going to be closed. And then from 6 p.m. onwards, we are all invited to have beers and party with us in the food truck area. Thank you for being here.